I'm joined by Rafiq Latta, Senior Correspondent here at Energy Intelligence. Rafiq, you moderated a panel on geopolitics, which is looking at kind of the post-COVID and post-US world disorder. That's a bit of a provocative title, but reflects an uncertain and maybe bleak picture. Did your panelists agree?
Yeah, it was kind of the response from all three of them was between not great to very bad. Essentially, we're looking at a world a world full of walls, a world which is messier with flashpoints, with an America that's kind of lost its way in terms of global governance, possibly its economy and its military edge. Coupled with a China that's seeking to really decouple from a capitalist economic structure and really put in place a Chinese-centered world with Chinese protocols for things as from tech protocols to transportation infrastructure and energy relations. So yeah, it was unremittably bleak, and that's without talking about COVID. There was a good point made at the end that we don't know yet if we're through the worst of it, through the woods as far as COVID is concerned. A lot more could happen, and even if there were a vaccine found, we could still be living with this disease for forever.
Yes, and looking at the rise of China, which you mentioned, I mean, it's been a common theme for many years, but it's not as necessarily as straightforward as a simple kind of shift in the balance of global power, is it?
No, not at all. And Isabel Hilton, who runs a non-profit called China Dialogue, made this point that China itself's got a lot of vulnerabilities. It's portrayed sometimes from the outside as an aggressive rising power that takes no prisoners, that's after economic hegemony, and it's got its own problems and vulnerabilities. It's got on one side, it's got some environmental vulnerabilities, reliance on water from the Qinghai Plateau. It's got massive pollution problems and its own reasons, internal drivers for wanting to implement this recently announced net zero carbon by 2060. So no, there is a more nuanced pattern at play. At the same time, it's pretty determined when China gets its mind, when it gets decided and it gets its act together, things tend to happen. It's determined to establish a more China-centered economic world around it with its allies and as part of this Belt and Road vision.
And in practical terms, we're already starting to see consequences in technology, aren't we? Where there's a danger of balkanization of the situation.
Yeah. That was something that was very interesting that came out of the panel, and Alistair Crook of Conflicts Forum Consultancy spoke about it at quite some length. That we're looking at a world where already countries like Russia and Iran, they're dealing with China protocols, and it's easier for them to deal with China protocols than it is actually with Western ones. And in certain fields, he made the point, and he was backed up by Ambassador Chaz Freeman, former US diplomat, that China has a lead in AI, in certain 5G, and quite a lot of technologies. China is the equal, or if not ahead, of the West, and it's got a proven track record of making up any lost ground very fast. So we're looking at this balkanization, and the question is, what does it mean for the world, for the rest of us? Is it a question of countries and companies have to make choices, and these choices will not necessarily be pleasant ones or easy ones, and the obvious inference to make is that it could be for the impoverishment of all.
And speaking of choices, I mean, US voters have a big one to make in just a few weeks. But how much difference would it make if Biden were to win the election?
But overwhelming message from my panelists was not that much, really. We're looking at a seismic secular shift. Whereby this is not just, yes, Trump has accelerated certain trends that were already in place, and has actively sought out confrontation and done a lot to undermine any sort of multilateral order, and has undermined certain international institutions. But the fact, I mean, what they were arguing was, we were seeing a US-China confrontation slowly emerging anyhow. We're seeing it on various fronts, from Taiwan to the South China Sea, to trade is a big one. So this is not something that's going to go away in all likelihood. And we have all the human rights issues as well that have been thrown up in the last year or so, Hong Kong and Xinjiang Uyghur Muslims. So it's not a question of Biden, if Biden wins, that this rivalry is going to go away, or the issues behind it are. Not at all, far from it. So I think it's fair to say the world's probably in for a messier couple of years than it has experienced in the last decade or so.
Indeed, and one final question, because I mean, climate is one area where we need global movement and kind of countries to work together. I mean, do you think that we'll see any change in climate efforts under a Biden administration?
And that's clearly where there couldn't be less than there is at the moment under the present administration. So yes, he's made pledges. How far he goes along with them is yet to be seen. But it'd be reasonable to expect that Paris would be back on the agenda. And he said so. So I think that will be a difference, and that will be one area where there's a bit more alignment with China. So yeah, that certainly will make a world of difference, and that is going to have a wider impact for everyone, of course. Thanks.
And certainly we'll be keeping our eyes very closely on what happens in the next weeks and months. So thank you very much, Rafiq, for sharing those insights with us.
Pleasure. Take care.